Have you ever wondered how one small event in one part of the world could cause other events on the complete other side of the world? Well, in the movie Babel, which I will be reviewing today, which was filmed and directed by Alejandro Gonzalez and released in 2006, is a good movie that shows multiple storylines all across the world and how they are interconnected. Now, the different locations that were shot during this movie were in Japan, the United States, Mexico, and Morocco, all with different characters, and they show how all their storylines are interconnected. Now, it is very important to keep an active to be actively watching and asking yourself questions throughout the movie, since it does cover multiple storylines and there are a lot of subtle details that can tell you where each character is during the story, and how these subtle details can affect the other storylines. Now, the film is edited in what's called a non-linear editing structure. The non-linear editing structure can tell multiple stories simultaneously and can also tell the same stories in multiple time frames. Now, this editing structure is good if you would like to show how stories are connected, how multiple stories are connected. Now, another point in the story and during the movie that I found important was cinematography, since depending on the location and the character being filmed, the cinematography skills did change. Specifically, when the characters were being filmed in Morocco, they did use a lot of wide angle camera shots showing how vast the desert was and how isolated the characters were. And it also showed that showed how that the only form of communication they had was through telephone calls, and depending on where they were going, they did affect the other characters and the other storylines. Another example of the cinematography used was when they were filming in Japan, filming the character named Chico, who was a mute and deaf teenage girl. Now, the use of non-diegetic and diegetic filming throughout her part of the storyline shows how isolated she was from her friends' society, and specifically what was most important to her, which was boys, since she is, of course, a teenage girl. Now, this shows just how tense their situations were, and it gives us an emotional connection to the characters specifically. Now, the final element that I found most important, that I think caused most of the issues in all the storylines, were the cultural differences. Now, specifically, since the main and the biggest issues came from Morocco, since Susan and Richard, who were tourists from America, were visiting Morocco, the cultural differences did cause a lot of tension, and did cause a lot of events to occur throughout the story. Now, even since I grew up in a Hispanic household, viewing Amelia's part of the story in Mexico was I could understand where she was coming from, and I could understand how certain parts of the story, why they happened and how they affected the other parts of the story. Now, although the stories in the movie were filmed in a non-linear editing structure, it was very confusing to keep up with what was happening exactly, and the time frames of when events happened. But the film does highlight the miscommunications of different cultures, and it shows how It shows how it shows just how different cultures can affect each other, even though they are all over the world. But thank you for listening.